We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We're live streaming today, so when you speak, please remember to use the mic. First item of business is the approval from our June meeting. I'd like a motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Any agenda modifications, Mark?
No.
Okay, rolling into new business. Item A, SD 2025-4, preliminary plot for the Jones-Stevenson site.
Yes, case SD 2025-4. The petitioner is Brenda Jones. The case is to consider the preliminary plat approval of the Jones plat. Property location is 10900 block of State Road 47 South in Wayland, Indiana. Land use and zoning. Existing land use is vacant. The existing zoning is industrial. Property was originally part of the Grasshopper Mower Warehouse, property now owned by Beck's Hybrids. The petitioner is requesting preliminary plat approval of the Jones plat. The proposed split is 1.5 acres out of the Brenda Jones owned 5.8 acre parcel. And the plat is for the purpose of an auto repair location. Of the road systems, the property is proposed to be accessed through an ingress-egress to the Beck's Hybrid entrance off of State Road 47 via the Jones ingress-egress easement. Your land use ordinance, zoning ordinance, the proposed plat, the one-lot split for the purpose of selling property to the Stevens Auto to develop auto repair shop on 1.5 acres meets the zoning code. It is zoned industrial. No special flood hazard areas located on the proposed site. No delineated wetlands exist on the property. The stormwater ordinance is being evaluated now, and it is not required for this plat review. Any development located that is on the proposed property would be required to submit calculation for the drainage plan, and the drainage plan is being developed. The petitioner has submitted all the items necessary for preliminary plat, and staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat.
Thank you, Mark. Does the petitioner have anything to add?
Well, I want to comment on the drainage, man, or should we?
No, you can intro it.
Hi, I'm Jim Swift with Swift Land Consulting, 130 West Main Street in Crawfordsville. And this is Todd Stevenson. I don't know if you know, Todd had a shop down on 231 and it burned last year in Ralph Corey's building, and he's trying to build a new facility closer to home. He lives in Park County, already does business in Waveland, so he's trying to take a corner of that big paved area you see and put a shop on it. So I don't usually do drainage plans in Montgomery County. I do drainage plans on commercial sites in Boone County. I used to do drainage plans in Montgomery County 20 years ago before I went and worked for Boone County. And since I've come back to do my own private business here, I focus more on just surveying, not on the engineering, and I work with Roger Azar a lot, and I leave him to that engineering part. On this particular site, Todd's my friend, and he's done me right with my cars, and I wanted to do him right, and so I took on this project, and it caused me to become aware of your current drainage ordinance, and I just would like to just bring to your attention what I saw, kind of from an informed outsider view almost. Your old drainage ordinance was what it was, and you had to basically, you developed a property, you couldn't release more water post-development in a 100-year storm than it was 3 pre-development in a 3-year storm. So the old ordinance penalized you for developing land, but it took into account things like what the existing surface was, whether it was grass going to hard surface or not, or what. I got into this, and in 2020, the drainage ordinance was altered by the commissioners. You passed a new drainage ordinance. And as far as I can tell, there were two primary alterations to that. One, it was taken out of the purview of the drainage board to review, and it was given to your board, the plan commission. So you guys inherited the drainage ordinance. And the other thing is they took out all that business of 100-year pre, 3-year pre and 100-year post, and taking into consideration what the existing conditions were. And the new ordinance just puts a flat number on how much you can release. And it takes into no consideration whatsoever as to what the ground was before. And once I ran the numbers, I was just amazed. I was shocked. And I brought it up and I've discussed it with Marc, and I detected a sympathetic ear because I think he's heard this from other people, and I don't know that you've heard it. And I'm here to advocate for Todd, but also to say, hey, I know enough about this to see that I think it puts an onerous burden on properties like this. Basically, you can release no more than 0.4 cubic feet per second per acre post-development, no matter what the site was pre-development. So in this particular case, he's on high ground. This site's going to be right down here. As it is right now, that's all densely packed asphalt millings. As far as I'm concerned, it's hard surface and it's high ground. And he's gonna put a pretty small building that's more hard surface because it's roof on the hard surface. But the drainage ordinance doesn't take any of that into account at all. It's almost as if we took a swamp and we paved it. He would have to do the exact same amount of detention. And when I calculated on this site, if we use the old ordinance, he literally has to make a detention basin 4 times the size of what the ordinance would have done, because it doesn't take into account. And he would have to make that same detention basin, like I say, if this were all grass where the rain hits and it soaks in, versus if it was all hard surface. And in this particular situation, that big pond up there was built as part of their drainage ordinance, but it's also part of the fire suppression system for the Bex program and the Bex building. And Ralph Jones, I don't know if you guys know Ralph, but Ralph, he aced it. He put tiles around this big parking area. This thing, that site drains as well as I've ever seen anything. It's just like perfectly laid out. Ralph nailed it. And if we follow your ordinance to the letter, it's my professional opinion, we're going to make everything just plain worse. We're going to have to do a big old detention basin down by that pond. We're going to concentrate flow into one area, whereas it kind of goes off by sheet flow now. And it's just, by this 0.4 CFS, you take your ordinance and frankly, you make matters worse in this particular situation. I think you make a burden on people in most situations with the current ordinance, and I think the commissioners ought to consider reducing that, making it a little easier to get along with. And I don't know, Marc, I'm just spouting right now, but I guess I'd like to say, since the ordinance says you guys have the right to waive, you have the right to increase runoff amounts, I would like to just speak for common sense that I don't think building the detention basin that the ordinance calls for in this site is a benefit to anybody. It's a burden on Todd and Ralph Jones. They're willing to do it, but it isn't going to make anything better, and it isn't going to slow down water getting to Sugar Creek in the event of an extreme flood. It's really going to accomplish very little, I think. So I don't know what the process is to ask for a waiver or ask for an increase in release. Can you comment on that, Marc?
Not, this discussion isn't pertinent to your plat case today, but yeah, I mean, it would be a waiver request on the drainage plan. It has nothing to do with the plat.
Well, but for this particular phase of the plat. But the next phase of the plat can't be approved without a drainage plan, right? So I guess I'm projecting forward. So then when we come back next month with that request, after I've given you calculations,
The initial drainage plan will have to go through review, come back from our reviewer, and then we could schedule that drainage
so,
approval.
so I guess can we, I mean, but if I put out a plan that says, here's what your ordinance says, and here's what that causes them to have to do on the site, strikes me as I'm boxing them into having to do that on his site. And I think it's burdensome to him. So. Understood. So maybe I'm gonna put out a plan that has a higher CFS rate. And then after your reviewer says, hey, that's not what our ordinance says, then I can come to the board and say, because you guys have the authority to change that. I just think if you go by your ordinance, in all sincerity, it is my personal and professional opinion, you make matters worse out there. You just make it worse. So I guess I'll be back next month, having gone through a drainage review, seeing if we can't get an official variance. But I want you guys, since the drainage ordinance is your baby now, I want you to be aware of the impact it has. And I think you'll find anybody else who does drainage calcs in Montgomery County will go, holy moly, holy moly. If I were doing the same thing in Boone County, we would do even though they have a similar kind of ordinance, the way it all shakes out, we would do a much, much smaller little detention basin. And I don't think it's in Montgomery County's interest to make it harder to do things like build a mechanic shop on the outskirts of Waveland. I think it's in our interest to make it easier, so that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you approve the plat.
Any other questions from the board, comments? Any public comment? There's no discussion, or do you have anything?
No, I just was wondering what exactly we have to do today to move it on to the next.
This is the preliminary plat approval. We do these for every subdivision of tracts. You don't necessarily have to have the drainage solved now. We won't sign final plat till the drainage is approved or a waiver is submitted. But it has nothing to do with the plat itself. The plat itself meets our code. And he can be working on the drainage in the meantime. If the plan commission wanted to hear a waiver request without him submitting a drainage plan, that's up to the plan commission, but that's not part of this process here.
Right,
It's an approval we need to finalize this process
right.
in final plat.
So we're ready to have a motion made?
I move to approve the plat.
We had a motion to approve. Looking for a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, item B, we have a member that has to recuse themselves, so we're going to reschedule a special meeting for July 29th at 4 p.m. Would that work for the group? For you both? Do I need to vote to make that meeting? I would. Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we have a special meeting for the preliminary plot for the Fugate Fault project on July 29th at 4 p.m. We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item C, conceptual plot for the Kelly Jones property.
So again, this is just introduction of the Charles Kelly subdivision. This is on Newcore Road, just south of Landstar. This is Landstar here and this is Newcore Road here. And just a quick introduction of it because it is a subdivision of tracks. Stephen Jones owns 2 tracks here, and the potential developer wants to, that's not a very straight line, but they want to parcel off 12 acres next to Landstar. There actually is an ag easement between Landstar and this property. But it would be, again, it would be taking a piece of 2 parcels on Newcore Road and splitting it for a subdivision of 1 parcel of 12 acres for a truck stop location, truck parking location. That's it for the introduction because I don't have a lot more information for you. But if you have any questions about that area, I'd be happy to answer those questions. But we will schedule that preliminary plat for, well, once we have the actual plat. I don't have the plat yet. I just have a concept of the plat. So once I have the plat and have review it, we'll schedule the preliminary plat.
Is this going to be something connected with Pilot or a separate?
No, this is a private company.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Other business, text amendment discussion.
We do have edits to the subdivision code, and I brought those to you just to hand them out today and have a little discussion. There's a red line version of that in front of you. Go through that, look at the red line changes that we're proposing to make, and if there's anything else that you see that needs to be in that code, we can get that to me and Dan as soon as you can, and we can get that scheduled for next month to have the initial hearing on the amendments to the subdivision control ordinance. There's some administrative things in there that are changes, and then we also do have a change of time span for approving plats that the state has handed down. So we'll be adding that to that as well. So I just wanted to hand it out to you today and have a quick discussion if there's anything on anybody's mind as far as the subdivision code and the edit.
What section are handed down from the state? You said the timeline?
Sorry?
You said that some of these updates are because we have to match state. Well, I was just asking what sections, right? Is that what you just said? That you were matching a state ordinance now?
Well, since this draft, the attorney has brought to light, there's a requirement that we take to preliminary or take to platting within 30 days of submission, which hinders us. Right now, we have to have it 20 days prior for review and then setting it for a legal hearing. So they're saying we have to have it entered, Dan can tell you for sure, but entered or even approved within 30 days.
Yeah, this draft was done before the new law was passed, so that change that Mark's talking about will be added to this. It's not in there yet. We were just, Mark and I reviewed this in the spring, and these were some technical changes that we wanted to make to deal with some cases that had come along. But then section 15242, which is on page 16, we've included a new provision for minor plats. Minor plats tend to be very simple to deal with, and yet we had no separate process. So under the proposed language, once the minor plat received preliminary approval, then the zoning administrator could administratively do the final approval, so you wouldn't have to deal with that, and that's very common. We didn't have that in our original, so that's one thing that's pretty significant. Aside from there's some language in there to deal with what happens if an application for a plat is incomplete. So we've dealt with that, and all the changes are in red. There's one other state law change that just took effect last week, And that is, there is now a new law which also requires us to use certain storm data. In the past, counties in Indiana were allowed to use any of a number of data sources for what average rainfall is, so that engineers could make calculations. State legislature heard complaints about that because engineers who went to different counties had to deal with different ordinances, just like Mr. Swift said. So now the new law says that we have to use FEMA's data and NOAA, which is the National Atmospheric and Oceanic Agency. So we're going to have two more changes to this. When you see it next time, it's going to be those two new laws. We don't have much choice about those, but that's what it's going to have. So.
And I'll staff report all this subdivision control ordinance for next month's meeting, so you'll have all those explanations, and we will be adding a couple of things to it. So it also affects floodplain ordinances as well. These changes that the state is making in a couple situations about the data that you use for review of FEMA floodplains and the rate insurance map. So there's a lot of things that are affected by this legislation. It's down in the weeds. It affects the building department. We're now not allowed to ask for architect and engineer stamps on Class 2 structures. Class 2 structures are houses, living spaces. They're restricting the time span in which we can review those as well, making it possible for people to use private inspectors and things like that. So there's several changes in this bill that affects everything we do in land use. So specifically, you'll see that in the subdivision control and also the stormwater.
So then, just like process of these, all the red marked stuff is stuff we could vote on at next meeting because it was presented today, correct? Like technically? Because but then because he's adding more stuff, we'd have to wait another month after that introduction.
It's a good question. It's already the law. So in reviewing any drainage calculations submitted by anyone, we have to apply those new rules. And then we'll be, essentially this subdivision controller to be catching up to the new law.
And one other thing on the zoning ordinance can we have, I know it says like adopted 2019, but can we have the last updated? Or is that somewhere else in here that I'm not finding?
The last page
last
in there
page has it? Okay.
gives you the.
There's a revision history table in the back.
In the back. Okay, thank you. I was looking for it in the front.
Yeah, and it's on page 142. And it shows all the revisions that have been made since this was adopted, starting in 2020 and all the way through current, the last change being made in February of this year. And so we include the articles that were affected, the subject matter, the date, and the ordinance number. So that, yeah, if you wondered like where we've gone since we originally adopted, that cover page, I'd be happy to include that, except that you'll see we would have already 12 amended dates below that. So we kind of left that alone, but that's why we put that schedule in the back on 142 and 143. The index starts on page 2. I mean the table of contents. And it's very detailed, page 2. Page 142, is that what you mean?
I'm saying where the revisions is listed that like you wanted to see when the revisions was. Like it's not labeled in the index, like to go to page 142. This is explains.
On page 8, page 8 it says go to table B.
I was looking for it
Yeah.
in the beginning. It's there.
You're going to make me defensive. I worked hard on that table of contents, I really did.
Okay, well, I guess our next special meeting is July 29th at 4 p.m. We'll see you then. I make a motion to adjourn. Do you have a second? All in favor, say aye.